And welcome to the 6th episode of The Performance Gap. I'm your host, Aimee Hussain, and today we're going to be sitting down with performance nutritionist Aimee Ellen O'Keeffe, who brings a wealth of experience with us today. Not only she had 4 years at Manchester United Females, but she's now working with England Red Roses and with Williams Everything F1. Today we're going to be discussing the importance of fueling in pregnant athletes and the integral part that carbohydrate has to play on sport performance. Let's jump in. Aimee, talk to me about the performance gap in female sports nutrition.
Well, I think there's quite a few, as you can imagine, with research being limited on the female side. It is moving in the right direction, I will say, but the area that I think is in is that support around family planning, pregnancy, postpartum in female athletes, essentially.
Right, yeah, and obviously I've seen your background because you've got a very long list of experiences. I guess for you, with your time amongst England Roses and F1 Williams, what has been a couple of key things that you've seen in the performance world that you can kind of pull away into, say, the everyday female athlete?
Yeah, I think it always will come down to habits, and you can be an elite athlete, the top 1% in the world, or you could be your everyday athlete who just want to push themselves every day. Sets of people have a goal. The environment's just maybe a little bit different. So there might be a little bit more pressure on the elite space, less on the everyday athlete. But for those people to be successful in whatever they want to achieve, they've got to improve their habits in one way or another. Otherwise, nothing will change.
Yeah, definitely. I can see it's, especially when we talk about the Gen Pop, it's all about habits that underpin that performance side of things and just kind of building consistency. I guess for you, some of the elements within, I think, your Man United time, 4 years, that was the first sort of taste of real world performance nutrition, if I'm right in saying. What were some of kind of the key eye-opening things that you started to learn that kind of almost shaped the kind of industry for you?
Yeah, wow, going back a few years there. So I was the first person to provide nutrition support in that team, which as a student at the time, there was a lot of pressure because I didn't believe the answers when I was then looking into it, look for the answers. So I didn't have them all. I learned really fast, but I think how did it shape you and the gaps that I may have seen. I was just surprised, naive around how little players knew in terms of education, going back to 2019. But then when I'm sitting here more experienced, of course they didn't have a lot of education, they didn't come through an academy, they didn't come in which educated them not even once a month. Then it made sense. But when I was in the fifth, because you think someone's an athlete, you always know. You've really got to start at the bottom essentially and build your way.
Right, yeah. I guess that probably the best way to learn is jumping in at the deep end as well. So you mentioned about habits. I guess that was very applicable at that point, because if there's no nutrition around it, it's like you got to start from building some good habits, a little bit of education, and then when you can start tailoring. I guess, where did that start with the girls then?
It started so simple, and budget wasn't amazing. They'd just been promoted to the WSL, I think, so they had 1 year in existence. And as you can imagine, resource was limited. Staff was on the ground. So it was, how can we make small changes at the breakfast service? And it was generally something simple as on the holiday, let's just say that the 2 days a week, can we put fruit juice and bagels out? And that was it. And it was like night and day difference. It was just something new. Going into the same thing all the time. And then things that people like, subtly I knew that they would be increasing their carb intake. They didn't really see the link yet because the education weren't there. So it was genuinely some of the smallest habits around fueling, pre-session fueling.
Yeah, I guess that's a massive point, because I make the kind of a link to, everyone knows they need to be fair and they've got to start running, but they don't need to be told that they're not silly. It's a case of how can we get that buy-in And I talk about push and pull factors. As you've probably seen online, I've got a run club here, and the rug club's building because everyone likes the post-run coffee and the community and that side, and that's that buy-in. They keep coming back. I guess it's the same sort of vein of like you're coming into a club, into a South 2019. It sounds like this is where WSL and that league's still building. The infrastructure's not completely there. That was just small wins, I guess.
100%. And I didn't think or going in, I would have thought so small. But it's just that perception from the outside in, Manchester United, biggest club in the world. But then you're humbled really quickly around, okay, back in 2019, it wasn't what it is now. And it's amazing the transformation and the transition and comes from back in and need a lot of finances. But I think just accepting that small things up, starting with the most thing, and then we added it around lunch. And then it was, okay, can we make some makeshift fueling stations? And it was just literally between the gym, because there was no lunch in between. Lunch was always after. So how can we do looking in someone's eye line as they're heading to the toilet or having a break, just to increase the ability to fuel in the environment? Nothing breaking. It was
doing the basics savagely well, and it's almost like you kind of it's almost discreet ways that you can sneak in. It sounds like, and just building those good habits without them noticing. Now, I had a little look, and obviously you're really prolific on social media about kind of pushing a really good fueled message. I guess that relates directly to that what you've been talking about. What was kind of some of the massive gaps specifically around fueling and carbohydrate fueling that you found? And I guess that kind of, as a wider sense, brings it to just general pop. We talk about skinny talk and all that sort of things. What have you seen, especially with that?
Yeah, so I think quite common for people in general, but to go long periods without food. Sometimes as a punishment. Sometimes, what I mean by punishment, an example could be they know they've had too much the day before. So then there's like a slight punishment to then potentially around a set, need more. That's common in females, I think. That's just punishment around food. I also just think like the lack of understanding, and I call it like underfueling, around not understanding that this training day, because a day we need more in the tank to get more out of the body. And I just think there's over the years, I just see not having that link between the two, and then when the penny drops and they trust you a bit more, like orange juice or extra snacks across the day, feel good. You'll do it again. You'll do it again.
And they'll get that intrinsic feedback. Oh, my performance increased. Oh, I've got a bit more in the tank. Full stop. Yeah. Now, I'm keen to really stick on female nutrition. I think it's something that's not massively spoken about, and especially my girls who I work with individually, it's very clear that there's a perception of you almost earn your right and earn your carbs, and there's a push and pull factor, and we don't really, as a kind of general idea, prioritize performance. So I guess for me, when we talk about carbohydrates, what are some of the telltale signs that you've seen and that are noticeable when we're not fueling, and almost the ramifications of if you're not actually hitting specific carb intake, it's going to cause this?
Yeah. Very good question. So I think one of the main signs you see is genuine low energy across the day and across the week. You also see like low moods and maybe being a little bit more irritable across the day. Sleep's often not great. Your immune system is often, I call it in the bin, but you're not very robust as a human. You're always catching that cold and getting that upset stomach with something else. I guess consuming level, it's off that easily. I guess not having carbs in the tank are susceptible to injury if that then wants to be in a deficit. I guess if we're looking at performance in general, just not being able to push and progress and adapt, because you've got that limiting, my legs are gone here, push, I've got nothing in the tank. Especially if you link it to maybe like the run club or people who you work with who may be 1.5 and there's that concept of where you just run out of fuel and then your day's over. All kind of circles back to in the body.
Yeah, no, I think there's some really, really solid points. I even alluded to some of the times, a couple of my clients who haven't said to me they haven't had anything in the morning, and they're like, "Oh, I'm feeling really faint," and 2-3 minutes later, it's like, "Oh, what happened?" It's like, yeah, have a drink, get some quick releasing carbs down you, and you've learned your lesson. And I think it's, yeah, as you said, it's just that education point. It's just like we need to go into our sessions fueled, hydrated, that side of things. I was having a little look. Obviously, I've seen you've come onto a few podcasts behind. I'd love to know a little bit about the story about the bone stress fracture, and a little bit about that and how that changed the way you kind of your lens as well. So, yeah, tell me about that.
Yeah, so this is the reason I'm standing here now talking to you. Really, I was PT back in the day, and it was before I went back to university. So let's just say 2017. I was working with a young female athlete who was maybe 13 at the time, and she was your typical athletic kid, all gangly. We used to see her on Friday. She played for Liverpool girls team, and we used to speak about what she was having for like a Chinese on the Friday night seeing me. But she had this injury where she just wasn't recovering from it. So I was like digging a bit deeper, speaking to Liverpool, and they said it was a pars fracture. Sorry, in hip. And as I've done a little bit of my digging, spoke to the go-to nutrition in my eyes, like Professor Green Close. He explained that it was really common in teenage academy boys before, and then it was into females as well. Prime example of, an active kid instantly just wanting to walk on every sport team, every activity, and then just not enough calories, not enough energy going into the tank. It's a big deficit mentally, and then that impacts your bone density, and you're more susceptible to stress fractures. Those type of stress fractures are really long in the recovery. It took her about a year to do this. So when I was starting nutrition, when I was like, wow, that is just so interesting, it kind of like blew me mind a little bit. Calories can really impact your ability to prevent injury, and I'd never actually had that link before. So that's where I then was interested in nutrition.
Wow, that's some story. And you said pars fracture. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is that to do, because it sounds like 13, she's probably going through a growth spurt, a peak height velocity, and that was through the kind of spine sort of thing, probably more T-spine, the lumbar spine. That's very common in male youth athletes, especially in the kind of setups, the academy setups as well, from what I've heard. And it's just that sheer volume, that sheer kind of energy availability, that they're not just panning through loads of activity, but they're a growing child as well. And so that, I guess, that started your kind of understanding of the energy availability, fueling, and then building to there. And so where was that in terms of that was before you decided to take up university and then move into the credited side of things?
Yeah, so that was, I took 7 years out of education once I did that undergrad. Went kind of with health, then went self-employed, and then it was essentially 6-7 years later it happened, and then I went back to John Moores to do a year full time sport nutrition, which is then when I applied to work at United, and then that was where my kind of sport career in quotation marks started.
Wow, so it's funny that butterfly effect. If you didn't come into that situation, and that would have changed the course of your education trajectory. That's really cool. The one other element that I've been on the youth athlete kind of topic is REDS. So could you kind of talk to me a little bit, because it's so important, and not many people, well, it's more common now and the knowledge behind it, but talk to me about kind of what REDS is, and more so kind of the impact that it can cause for female athletes as well.
Yeah, so REDS is an abbreviation of relative energy deficiency in sport, and a little bit controversial. I think it's definitely overdiagnosed in athletes, but what I do think is it is caused by a period of low energy. Well, essentially, when someone is diagnosed with REDS, often they're being through a chronic period of low energy, where then that's had an impact on their system, their bone density, their overall health, psychologically as well. So when you don't have enough energy coming into the body to perform not just exercises and training in and out of the gym, also just function optimally, that is then you hit a few speed bumps and the road. So it is more common in female athletes, REDS, diagnosis of REDS. But I think a lot of the issues comes down to females. Males can get this as well, but females being in periods of low energy, which can be intentional and accidental. So some people can have calorie intake coming in, and they're just burning too much, and they don't even understand what's going on. Some people can intentionally reduce the calorie intake, and they can even just keep the training load as it is, or they can ramp it again, and then you can see that shift on the scales into the imbalance. The research does show that there's this in the past as well on catching methods, and one of those is when it comes down to, I think, your menstrual cycle can switch off essentially to your reproductive system. Just says absolutely not. Save energy for you to digest your food, to breathe, switches off. But in my experience, that actually happened due to stress, like a stress response, trauma, and there's more research. I just find it really mind-blowing, to be honest. It's not. It's a calorie out. To be a trauma, stress that switches off. Just like.
That's really interesting, because I've always naturally assumed that it's due to low energy availability. I've done a bit of research on myself, and I'm not going to sit here and try and say I'm a gyno or endocrinologist, but from what I've gathered, it's obviously you have that low energy availability, and they talk about, I'm going to butcher it, basically, it's a butchered way today, but basically a regular cycle outside of 21 or 35 days. Oligomenorrhea, there we go. And so you would suggest, from anecdotal experience, and I think probably more research coming about that, it's a case of there's more stress-induced factors that are affecting your endocrine system, which like knock-on hormonal regulation is being disrupted.
Yeah, completely right. I've seen it twice in the past few years since I've been working with in female sport. The most common impact of low energy is you get them become irregular and then maybe lose your cycle for a period of time. But yeah, there is to stress trauma.
Wow, that's really interesting. I guess for those instances, what was your path of choice? Did you go down a route of going like a gyno, like endocrinologist? What's the process in that?
Yeah, so back a few years, so it was with context. It was a academy player who was transitioning into the first team environment. Now, when you actually, that's stressful. Yeah, she must have been 18, 19. Yeah, living away from home, away from her parents, in a kind of guest house. I can't think what you call them. Into a new environment. And I was actually working around, food diaries and looking at step up and just by chance we were doing that. And then she reported to the doctor that the menstrual cycle had became irregular and it wasn't there. And I know there's more cogs to it than just her food photos, but it was really eye-opening. That was that first experience for me to be like, wow. Like, in my opinion, I've got snapshots of her week. She's a decent viewer, really coachable, but then all of the external things, it made sense. And it took 3 months getting into the environment, essentially becoming more comfortable, making friends, and then menstrual cycle.
Oh wow! So it's like that kind of allostatic load, cognitive load that you really need to take, I guess, an awareness to. It's really interesting because some of my females who we make sure we're fueling effectively, and it's like there'd be times where things are going on in their life, sleeps as a result impacted, work scheduled really busy, and they're like, I'm now pushing on to 34, 35 days. It's getting to that point. It's like, where is it going? And as you said, funnily enough, our stress is slowly increasing. I do a subjective measure and it's like, okay, right, well, now we're 4 out of 5 in terms of like stress and irritability. Clearly there's something going on underneath the bonnet, but it's interesting to hear that there's more that to play than just your energy availability. I wanted to move on because obviously talking of the development, especially as you're moving into adult, talking about your PhD. So it's in fertility and pregnant athletes. How did that come about?
Oh, well. So I've been on my own kind of IVF journey with my wife, and it's definitely a topic close to my heart, which I don't mind talking about at all. So that's where the interest and passion has came from. And I've been saying that, I want to do a PhD, and I've said it since I left university in 2020, but probably never really tried to do one or like any effort into it, just said I do want to do one eventually. And divine time and completely believing, and everything kind of happened for a reason. And it was Professor Graham Close. He messaged me back in April maybe and said, how do you fancy being a world leader in the pregnant athlete? And I was just like, okay, was this like, right? And it's being funded between the RFU and LJMU. I'm not sure it's been split. Don't really need to know. But because there's a gap in the research and expertise at England Red Roses, the RFU, it kind of ticks the box to being funding available to develop research in this area. So it's kind of happened really quickly, and started this month. I've had a couple of meetings, just kind of getting to grips with what the studies are going to be, albeit it's actually evolve. But we are starting PhD, which takes maybe 6 years. Mental. I've just got to laugh about it because like timing is not the best. Due to become a mum for the first time next month, but you just got to roll with the punches and it'll work.
Big congrats for that to come. I'm actually keen to delve into this a little bit. Obviously, with your Red Roses, you had the supervision of 4 pregnant athletes. So, I'm keen to know. Talk to me a little bit what's been going on. How has that affect from the female athlete, and what does pregnancy implications have?
Yeah, so we've got 4 pregnant athletes, which is amazing, and they're all at different stages. We've got one, as we speak right now, due this weekend, I think. We've got one who's due in 6, and then we've got one who's just over halfway, and one who is like 25 weeks. So very spread out, which is nice.
I guess on that in particular, if you could talk through the trimesters, I guess, in terms of the changing and challenges, because it sounds like you've got a different equal length, so that you've probably seen things change as you progress through as well.
Yeah, so in the first trimester, obviously it's very down to the person if they want to disclose that they're pregnant, and then I guess that's another topic within itself. So that can be very private. I may not be involved at that point, which is, absolutely. But in that first trimester, what you will find is a lot of pregnant women are very tired, could be really nauseous, or they could be absolutely fine.
Minefield to tackle then, hey?
Yeah. So they've all been so different. So first trimester is usually a bit tricky in terms of supporting, which may get better over the next few years. Who knows? I hope it does. But there's a big focus on a lot of growth that's going on in the weeks, and it would be great to support in that initial 12 weeks because, not to be negative, there is an increased risk of miscarriage in that first 12. So if we can address everything we can, supplementation, nutrition, we can hopefully help. And then move into the second. Again, this is where I kind of came in to support. We had one player who got diagnosed with gestational diabetes. It was definitely a learning curve for me and a learning curve for her because she's one of the healthiest players I've ever worked with. There's no direct link. It's just very by chance. You can increase your probability if you're overweight and unhealthy, but it can be just really bad, which is what
it's just idiopathic. There's no real cause.
Yeah, so this is an issue for the little baby that's growing inside because too much insulin can get into the placenta. Then got to really manage that blood sugar roller coaster that someone can go on. So really hard as an athlete because he's still training hard, albeit they're not doing any contact at this point or anything like that, but they're still training hard in the gym. If they want to run, they're still doing running interval sessions, they're on the bike. So they're not your typical pregnant person. They're still training hard. That blood glucose is being okay, but you can't put too much in case you then go over a certain level, and then you're at a risk. So in the end, for this ended up being that she had to have insulin. It was, I guess, a little bit disheartening because she felt like it was a bit of her fault, but it wasn't. She was doing amazing for the insulin to manage her glucose levels. We were finding different snacks that she could have, like dates, peanut butter. Didn't actually spike too high and could be used really well as a pre-session snack or even a post-session snack. So that was one kind of scenario. And then in the second trimester, another player, she wanted to do a high rocks.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. Which, you know what, I've got some. She said, tier 2 needed one, so why can't I? Comments, no response back. So with that carbohydrate loading for an event like that, when you're pregnant, looking at the research again, because this was brand new to me, should be started earlier than like your 24 to 48 hours. You can actually start 4 to 5 days out and kind of build it in purely because that baby's taking that glucose quicker than if it wasn't there, essentially. But again, needed to be mindful of how the player was feeling. As you can imagine, I'm sure you've had the in the past, like appetite might not be there. It might be really nauseous. Thought food is absolutely not on the agenda today. So it was pretty tricky. Another person across all pregnancies has just had nausea. So not essentially vomiting, but just that feeling of just all the time. So it has an impact on how her energy availability while she's training, growth of the baby, calories in, her immune system, lactation. So yeah, as you can imagine,
Yeah, it's one thing I found, and just to give context, so one of my clients, she's 14 weeks now into a pregnancy, so just crossed the second trimester, and obviously from what I've seen, I've spoken to you offline about the increase in calorie demand, and then also the gain in weight, and I was really like surprised at how quickly since the second trimester it's like 300 grams every week now, and it's continuing, and like obviously it's a case of like you got to make sure, and you don't really know how much in terms of fueling until the body responds to a degree, because it's always changing, and there's 101 different hormones that are changing of when you feel hungry and when you don't, and at the moment we've got craving for Baby Bell, so that's great. But it's a case of like you've got to manage on the go, and there's no one rule. And so I guess with that, from what I experience, it's like, okay, if you're not hungry and you're feeling nauseous, liquid carbs that are going to be soft on the stomach are going to be better, but it's a case of taking it day by day.
Yeah, it really is. You could be in such a good kind of routine, good structure, when you wake up and you don't feel
today's not a good day. Yeah. I guess then as you move into, so I guess that the same sort of symptoms will kind of play a part in terms of energy availability, and that the hunger and being satiated in third trimester. Is that kind of exacerbated, or what tends to happen as you move into the final couple of months?
Yeah, so with a couple of them being in the third trimester now, and also more minutes from kind of the lived experience of it, there's lots of reports of feeling full really quickly, because as you can imagine, all of the organs are would start to get a bit, and those big meals just aren't working. Yeah. For example, yesterday, my wife had like she eats before she trains, so she had like 3 eggs, and she thought she was hungry for a piece of toast with it, and then was so full. She was like, this is absolute nightmare. Whereas me 4 weeks ago, absolutely fine. So kind of just keep up that blood sugar levels, just appreciating the portions can reduce and you go little enough today, which is what I found with the best. It's not to say that everybody in the third trimester will do that, but you will find, especially with it being obviously summer here in the UK, the heat can have a massive impact on your appetite as well. So if you're in that third trimester in the peak heat of summer, it is tough, of course.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. It's like most things, it's very bespoke to the individual, and there are kind of, I guess you can say, frameworks. It's dials and levers that you're going to tweak and change, and each day as it comes. And I guess the one thing I've seen a lot of what you've been posting is the training side. It's like you're still going to keep active, still training, try and adhere to good habits as much as you can to help offset. And I didn't coin it, but someone did online, movement is medicine, and trying to keep moving, keep active, just to help being fit. So I guess that helps postnatal as well.
Yeah, and it'll help during the birth as well. Like if you're fit and strong, like it'll help with the contractions, it'll help with the recovery. And I guess one thing I did forget about what previously when I mentioned around the pregnant athletes and it being summer, even if it wasn't summer, hydration is really, really important during pregnancy. And it's something that has tripped a few of the athletes up. And it can have, you're more at risk as well during pregnancy, constipated. And I'm sure we've all had in the past where we know we haven't drank enough, we haven't been to the toilet as often as we should. Oh, there's a link, even more of a link in pregnancy. So that link to hydration, fibre intake is really important during pregnancy as well, so that we have as optimal digestion as we can.
Yeah, I can imagine that's the one thing you don't want. You don't want to be constipated and you're still feeling hungry, or you're feeling satiated as well on top, which is going to not make you eat even more. Awesome. Last sort of tradition I've got on the pod is I want to get a key takeaway from everyone that comes on. So for yourself, Aimee, If for the female athletes listening, and this can be pregnant female athletes as well, what could be one takeaway that they could apply in the next 24 hours that could instantly improve their nutrition and support around their training that you would suggest?
Yeah, if we take it away from pregnancy, away from fertility for a moment, I personally feel that fasted training has given this gold medal over the past years that it should be done by females. It's the right thing to do. And from experience and digging into the research, it can be so damaging to females, not only from performance output, especially if you're doing like spins, but also from a hormonal standpoint. It's ramping up your cortisol. You're actually someone who wants to get pregnant, something that we really don't want to be ramping up. And it can cause testosterone to decrease, which is something that we need to be if we're looking for successful fertility. So I would say, if you do fasted training and your session's hard, have a little bit of a rethink. Something small and simple, carbs, even just a drink, can massively support female hormones and female performance.
Brilliant. That's a great signal. And just on that in particular, what's some of your go-tos for that? You mentioned dates, obviously, you said dates and peanut butter, but for you, like fast acting carbs, you've got half an hour, 45 minutes before a session, it's a training, like a gym session. What would you suggest?
Personally, like what's worked in the past is, if I'm talking about me, I'll have like crumpet with jam with a honey on, done with like a glass of fruit smoothie or a fruit juice. If I need 2 crumpets, I'll go for 2 if I know it's a tough one. But then other people don't like solid foods in the morning. And again, no problem with that. You double up on the juice, on the smoothie. Can it be something as simple as a banana and do it? A lot of people, I'm sure you've experienced, Sammy, with eating in the morning. Absolutely fine. Let's have a drink and still fuel the body.
Yeah, brilliant. I think I've definitely noticed. I remember when you had your running phase, those crumpets and jam and your stories for sure. And before we go, Aimee, where can people find you?
Yeah, so I am on Instagram and it's at Aimee Ellen O'Keeffe. And then I'm also on LinkedIn. And again, Aimee Ellen O'Keeffe. Keep it super simple.
Awesome stuff. Aimee, thank you for jumping on.
Thank you so much, Sammy. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
And thanks to Aimee for taking time out of her busy schedule, soon to be mum and the PhD on the horizon. And thank you for joining. Be sure to head to the show notes to check out Aimee's socials for all things sports nutrition. If you're looking for help in your physical development, becoming stronger, fitter, faster, then be sure to head to my website. That's www.sammyhusseinsc.com. and book in a complimentary strategy call where we can get granular on your physical development. Alternatively, you can head to my Instagram at coach_Sammy Hussein and drop me a message and we can go from there. Until next time, I'll speak to you soon.